Princess Isabella had always loved the grand garden parties at Rosewood Palace. The smell of fresh roses mixed with the sound of gentle music and polite conversation made her feel happy and safe. At 8 years old, she was still young enough to find wonder in everything around her royal home. On this particular sunny afternoon, Isabella wore her favorite pale blue dress with tiny silver buttons. Her dark curls bounced as she walked through the crowd of well-dressed guests. Everyone smiled and bowed slightly when they saw her, just as they always did. She loved meeting new people and hearing their stories. The garden party was bigger than usual today. Her parents, the king and queen, had invited many important people from neighboring kingdoms. There were diplomats, nobles, and their families all gathered on the palace grounds. Isabella noticed several other children around her age, though most stayed close to their parents. As she wandered near the rose garden, Isabella heard something that made her stop. It was not the usual polite chatter she was used to hearing. Instead, she heard raised voices coming from behind a tall hedge. Curiosity got the better of her, and she quietly moved closer to listen. "Give me that right now," demanded a harsh voice that sounded like it belonged to an older boy. "A servant's son has no right to touch something so fine." Isabella peeked through a small gap in the hedge and saw 3 boys who looked to be about 12 years old. They all wore expensive clothes and had the confident posture that came from growing up in wealthy families. In front of them stood a smaller boy, maybe 9 years old, who was clearly frightened. The smaller boy had sandy brown hair and wore a simple but clean outfit. In his trembling hands, he held a small wooden toy horse that looked handmade. The paint was slightly chipped, but it was clearly made with love and care. "Please," the younger boy said quietly. "It was a gift from my father. He made it for me before he left to serve in the royal guard." One of the older boys laughed meanly. "Your father is just a guard. He probably stole the wood from the royal stables." The other boys joined in the cruel laughter. Isabella felt her cheeks grow warm with anger. She had never seen children being mean to each other like this before. In her world, everyone was always polite and kind, at least when she was around. This was completely new to her, and she did not like it at all. The boy with the toy horse looked like he might cry, but he was trying hard to be brave. "My father is a good man," he said with a shaky voice. "He has served the royal family for 10 years. "Nobody cares about your father," said another of the bullies. "Now give us that toy, or we will take it anyway." He reached forward and grabbed the wooden horse from the smaller boy's hands. Isabella watched in shock as the 3 bullies began tossing the toy horse between themselves. Just out of reach of the younger boy, each time he tried to grab it, they would throw it to one of the others. They were laughing and enjoying his distress. "Stop it, please," the boy pleaded, jumping and reaching for his treasured toy. "You might break it." That was exactly what the bullies wanted to hear. "Oh, you are worried we might break it?" said the first bully with a wicked grin. "Maybe we should see how strong it really is." Isabella could not believe what she was seeing. Her heart was pounding, and she felt a strange new emotion she had never experienced before. It was not just anger, but something deeper. She felt like she had to do something, but she was not sure what. The princess had been taught all her life about kindness, fairness, and protecting those who needed help. Her tutors had told her stories about brave knights and noble rulers who stood up for what was right. But she had never thought she would need to put those lessons into practice herself, especially not at a garden party. She watched as one of the bullies held the wooden horse high above his head, pretending he might throw it to the ground. The younger boy looked terrified that his precious gift might be broken. Isabella could see tears starting to form in his eyes, though he was still trying to be brave. The other party guests were far enough away that they could not see what was happening behind the hedge. The adults were all busy with their conversations, and did not notice that some children had wandered off. Isabella realized that she might be the only person who could help the younger boy, but what could she do? She was just 8 years old, and the bullies were much bigger than her. They were also guests at her family's party, which made the situation more complicated. She could not just run to get her parents, because that might cause a scene and embarrass everyone. Isabella took a deep breath and tried to think clearly. Her governess had always taught her that being royal meant having both privileges and responsibilities. Maybe this was one of those times when she needed to use her position to help someone who needed it. As she stood there behind the hedge, watching the cruel game continue, Princess Isabella made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find a way to help that boy no matter what it took. She just needed to figure out how to do it without making things worse. The wooden horse was still being tossed around, and the younger boy was getting more upset with each passing moment. Isabella knew she had to act soon, before something terrible happened to the precious toy that meant so much to him. Isabella decided she needed to learn more before she could help. She quietly moved around the hedge to get a better view while staying hidden. From this new angle, she could see the boys more clearly and hear their conversation better. The three bullies were clearly enjoying themselves. She noticed they all wore similar clothing that marked them as sons of wealthy merchants or minor nobles. Their shoes were polished. Their hair was perfectly styled, and they carried themselves with the arrogance that sometimes came with privilege. "What is your name, servant boy?" asked the tallest of the three bullies as he held the wooden horse just out of reach. "Thomas," replied the younger boy quietly. "Thomas Miller. My father is Captain Miller of the Royal Guard." Isabella's eyes widened. She knew Captain Miller. He was one of her father's most trusted guards, a kind man who had served the royal family faithfully for many years. She had seen him many times around the palace, always polite and respectful. He had even helped her once when she got lost in the palace gardens during a game of hide-and-seek. "Captain Miller?" scoffed one of the bullies. "I have never heard of him. He must not be very important." This made Isabella even angrier. Captain Miller was very important and well respected by everyone in the palace. These boys clearly did not know what they were talking about, but they were being cruel anyway. "He is important to me," Thomas said quietly, his voice getting stronger. "He taught me about honor and standing up for what is right." The bullies laughed again. "Honor? What does a guard son know about honor?" said the second bully. "Real honor comes from noble birth and wealth, not from playing with toy horses." Isabella watched Thomas's face carefully. Despite being outnumbered and scared, she could see a spark of determination in his eyes. He was not going to let them insult his father without defending him, even if it meant getting into more trouble. "My father has more honor in his little finger than all three of you put together," Thomas said, his voice shaking but firm. "He risks his life every day to protect good people from bullies like you." This bold statement surprised the three older boys. They had expected Thomas to become more frightened, not braver. For a moment they seemed unsure of what to do next. Isabella felt a surge of admiration for Thomas. Even though he was scared and smaller than his tormentors, he was willing to defend his father's reputation. It reminded her of the stories her tutors told about brave knights and noble heroes. The moment of uncertainty did not last long. The tallest bully's face grew red with anger. "How dare you speak to us that way?" he shouted. "We are the sons of important people. You are nothing but a servant's child." He raised the wooden horse higher, as if he was really going to throw it down and break it. Thomas gasped and reached up desperately, but the bully was too tall. "Please," Thomas said, his earlier bravery giving way to fear for his treasured possession. "I will do anything you want. Just please do not break it. It is all I have to remember my father by while he is away on duty." Isabella learned something new from this. Captain Miller was not at the palace today because he was away on some kind of royal business. That explained why Thomas was at the party without his father's protection. Some of the palace staff's families were invited to larger events like this, but the children usually stayed close to their parents. The second bully had an idea that made Isabella's stomach turn. "If you want your toy back," he said with a nasty smile, "then you have to prove you deserve it. Get down on your hands and knees and beg like the servant you are." Isabella could not believe what she was hearing. Making someone humiliate themselves like that was wrong on so many levels. She had been taught that everyone deserved dignity and respect, no matter their position in life. Thomas looked horrified at the suggestion. Isabella could see him struggling with the impossible choice between his dignity and his precious toy. The wooden horse was not just a plaything to him. It was a connection to his father and a symbol of love and care. "I will not do that," Thomas said quietly, but his voice was firm. "My father taught me that a person's worth is not measured by their birth or their wealth, but by their character and their actions." The bullies were getting more frustrated by Thomas's refusal to be completely broken by their treatment. They had expected him to either fight back physically, giving them an excuse to really hurt him, or to completely submit to their demands. His quiet dignity was not what they had planned for. Isabella realized she was witnessing something important. Thomas was showing real courage. Not the kind that involved swords and battles, but the kind that involved standing up for your beliefs even when you were afraid. It was the kind of courage her tutors had taught her was the most important of all. While she watched, Isabella began to form a plan. She could not just march over there and order the bullies to stop. That might make things worse for Thomas in the long run. She needed to be smart about this and find a way to help that would actually solve the problem. She noticed that the bullies kept mentioning how important their families were. They seemed very concerned with status and appearance. Maybe she could use that against them somehow. Isabella also realized that this situation was teaching her something about her own position as a princess. She had always known she was royalty, but she had never really understood what that meant beyond pretty dresses and palace life. Now she was beginning to see that being royal came with responsibilities to protect and help others. The wooden horse was still being tossed between the three bullies, and Thomas was still trying to reach it. Isabella could see that he was getting tired from all the jumping and reaching, but he had not given up hope of getting his father's gift back. She knew she had to act soon. The longer this went on, the more chance there was that the toy would actually be broken, either on purpose or by accident. And the longer Thomas had to endure this treatment, the more it would hurt him. Princess Isabella took one more look at the scene, memorizing the faces of the bullies and making sure she understood exactly what was happening. Then she quietly moved away from the hedge to put her plan into action. She was going to help Thomas, and she was going to make sure these bullies learned an important lesson about treating others with respect. Isabella walked around the hedge and stepped into the small clearing where the bullying was taking place. She had decided to try a direct but polite approach first, hoping that her presence alone might be enough to stop the cruel behavior. "Good afternoon," she said in her most proper royal voice. "I could not help but notice that you boys seem to be having some kind of disagreement." The three bullies immediately stopped their game and turned to look at her. Their faces showed surprise and then recognition as they realized who she was. All three boys quickly straightened up and tried to look more presentable. "Your Royal Highness," said the tallest bully, bowing slightly. The other two boys followed his lead, though they looked nervous and uncomfortable. Thomas looked relieved to see someone else, especially someone who clearly commanded respect from his tormentors. He had not expected help to arrive in the form of the young princess, but he was grateful nonetheless. "We were just playing a game," said the second bully, trying to sound innocent. The wooden horse was still in his hands, and he held it behind his back as if hiding it would make the situation better. Isabella raised one eyebrow, a gesture she had learned from watching her mother deal with difficult situations. "A game?" she repeated. It did not look like everyone was enjoying this game equally. The bullies exchanged worried glances. They were clearly trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected development. They could not be openly rude to the princess, but they also did not want to admit what they had really been doing. "Thomas," Isabella said, turning to the younger boy with a kind smile, "are you enjoying this game?" Thomas looked uncertain about how to answer. He did not want to get the older boys in trouble, but he also could not lie to the princess. "Not really, Your Highness," he said quietly. "I see," Isabella said, turning back to the bullies. "Perhaps you could explain the rules of this game to me? I am always interested in learning new ways to play." The tallest bully cleared his throat nervously. "Well, Your Highness, it is rather complicated. Perhaps too complicated it might not be suitable for someone of your status." Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly. She was young, but she was not stupid, and she could tell when someone was trying to avoid answering her question. "I think I am quite capable of understanding the rules of a children's game," she said coolly. The tension in the air was growing thicker. The bullies were trapped between their desire to continue tormenting Thomas and their need to show proper respect to the princess. Thomas stood quietly to the side, still hoping to get his wooden horse back. "The game is called Keep Away," said the second bully hesitantly. "We take turns throwing an object, and the person in the middle tries to catch it." "I see," Isabella said thoughtfully. "And whose object are you using for this game?" There was a long pause. The bullies looked at each other, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. Finally, the third bully spoke up. "It belongs to him," he said, pointing at Thomas. "And did Thomas agree to let you use his possession for your game?" Isabella asked, her voice remaining calm but taking on a slightly sharper edge. Another uncomfortable silence. Isabella waited patiently, having learned from her parents that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply wait for someone to answer your question. "Well," stammered the tallest bully. "He did not exactly say no." "That is not the same as saying yes," Isabella pointed out. "In my experience, when someone asks please stop and please give it back, they are not agreeing to participate in a game." The bullies were beginning to realize that the princess had been watching them for longer than they had initially thought. This made them even more nervous because it meant she had seen their actual behavior, not just the aftermath. Thomas looked amazed that the princess was standing up for him. He had heard stories about Princess Isabella being kind, but he had never imagined she would personally intervene to help him. "Your Highness," said the second bully, "trying a different approach, we meant no harm. We were just having a bit of fun." "Fun for whom?" Isabella asked pointedly. "It seems to me that fun should be enjoyable for everyone involved. When one person is distressed and asking for their property back, it stops being fun and becomes something else entirely." The bullies were running out of excuses, and they knew it. Isabella's calm but firm questioning was making it impossible for them to justify their behavior. They had been caught, and by someone they could not intimidate or dismiss. "Perhaps," Isabella continued, "you could return Thomas's toy to him now, and we can all continue enjoying the garden party together." For a moment, it seemed like this reasonable request might end the situation peacefully. The second bully looked like he was about to hand the wooden horse back to Thomas, but the tallest bully was not ready to give up so easily. His face showed a flash of anger at being told what to do even by a princess. "With respect, Your Highness," he said, his tone becoming slightly less respectful. "This is really between us boys. Perhaps this is not something that concerns you." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. Even when adults disagreed with her parents, they did so with complete respect and proper protocol. This boy was actually dismissing her, suggesting that she should mind her own business. Thomas gasped quietly at the bully's bold rudeness. Everyone knew that speaking disrespectfully to a member of the royal family was completely unacceptable, regardless of the circumstances. The other two bullies looked shocked at their friend's words. They tried to gesture for him to stop talking, but he was too angry to pay attention to their warnings. Furthermore, the tallest bully continued, emboldened by what he saw as Isabella's gentle approach, "This servant boy needs to learn his place. If we just give him back his toy now, he will never understand the proper order of things." Isabella felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice steady. "And what exactly do you think the proper order of things is? People like us," he said, gesturing to himself and his friends, "are meant to be in charge. People like him," he pointed dismissively at Thomas, "are meant to serve. It is the natural way of the world." This statement revealed everything Isabella needed to know about these bullies. They were not just being mean for fun. They genuinely believed they had the right to treat others badly because of their families' wealth and status. Isabella realized that her gentle approach was not going to work with these particular boys. They had mistaken her kindness for weakness and her politeness for uncertainty. She was going to have to try a different strategy. "I think," she said quietly, her voice taking on a new quality that made everyone present pay closer attention, "that you have a very poor understanding of what the proper order of things actually is." The tallest bully's face reddened at Isabella's words. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone younger than him, even if she was a princess. His pride was hurt, and he was about to make a very big mistake. "What would you know about the real world?" he said, his voice rising with anger. "You live in a palace and have servants waiting on you hand and foot. You have never had to work for anything or prove yourself to anyone." Isabella felt her breath catch in her throat. She had been spoken to rudely before, but never with such open disrespect and contempt. The boy was not just being impolite. He was actively insulting her and everything she represented. The other two bullies looked terrified now. They knew their friend had gone too far, but they were too scared to stop him. They glanced around nervously, hoping no adults would appear and witness this disaster. Thomas stood frozen in shock. He could not believe someone was speaking to the princess this way. In his world, everyone respected the royal family completely, regardless of their personal feelings. "You think because you wear pretty dresses and live in a fancy house, you can tell the rest of us how to behave?" The tallest bully continued, his anger making him reckless. Well, let me tell you something, Princess. Out here in the real world, power belongs to those who are strong enough to take it. To emphasize his point, he grabbed the wooden horse from his friend and held it high above Thomas's head. This little servant boy is weak, so we take what we want from him. That is how the world really works. Isabella felt a cold fury building inside her chest. This boy was not just bullying Thomas anymore. He was challenging the entire foundation of everything she had been taught about fairness, justice, and protecting those who could not protect themselves. "Give him back his toy immediately," Isabella said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of royal command. It was a voice she had heard her parents use when they were truly angry, and it surprised even her to hear it coming from her own mouth. "Or what?" the bully sneered. "What are you going to do about it? Run crying to your mommy and daddy?" The insult hit Isabella like a physical blow. No one had ever mocked her relationship with her parents before. The boy was deliberately trying to humiliate her, just as he had been doing to Thomas. But his cruel words had an unexpected effect. Instead of making Isabella feel weak and helpless, they made her realize something important. She was not helpless at all. She was Princess Isabella of Rosewood, daughter of the king and queen, and she had power that these bullies could not even imagine. However, before she could respond, the situation got even worse. "You know what?" said the tallest bully, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "I think this toy is too nice for a servant's son anyway. Maybe it needs to be taught some respect too." He raised the wooden horse even higher, and for a terrifying moment Isabella thought he was actually going to throw it down and smash it on the ground. Thomas let out a small cry of distress and reached up desperately. "Please," Thomas begged. "I will do anything you want. Just do not break it." The bully paused, enjoying the power he had over both Thomas and the situation. "Anything?" he asked with fake sweetness. Thomas nodded frantically, tears now openly running down his face. "Anything," he whispered. "Then get on your knees and apologize to us for bringing your inferior toy to such a fine party," the bully commanded. "Apologize for thinking you deserve to play with the same things that proper children play with." Isabella felt sick to her stomach. This demand was so cruel and unfair that she could barely process it. The bully was trying to break Thomas's spirit completely, to make him humiliate himself and accept that he was somehow worth less than other children. Thomas looked at Isabella with desperate eyes, as if asking for permission or forgiveness for what he was about to do. She could see that he was actually considering the bully's horrible demand because the wooden horse meant so much to him. "Do not do it, Thomas," Isabella said firmly. "Do not apologize for something you have not done wrong." The tallest bully laughed harshly. "Listen to the little princess trying to give orders. This is not your palace, Your Highness. Your royal commands mean nothing here." He turned back to Thomas with cruel satisfaction. "You have 5 seconds to get on your knees, or your precious toy becomes firewood. 5, 4, 3. Thomas looked back and forth between Isabella and the bully, torn between his dignity and his desperation to save his father's gift. Isabella could see him starting to bend his knees, preparing to submit to the humiliating demand. 2, the bully continued, clearly enjoying every moment of Thomas's agony. Isabella realized that her gentle approach had failed completely. These boys did not respect her kindness or her reasonable requests. They saw her youth and her politeness as weakness, and they were willing to be openly disrespectful to a member of the royal family, if it meant getting their way. But what they did not understand was that Isabella had been holding back her real power. She had been trying to solve this problem without using her royal authority, because she thought it would be better for everyone involved. Now she realized that sometimes authority existed exactly for situations like this one. 1, the bully said, raising the wooden horse to shoulder height, preparing to throw it down. Thomas was almost on his knees now, his face streaked with tears and shame. Isabella could see that he was about to give in to the cruel demand, and she knew she could not let that happen. Something inside her snapped. All her life she had been taught about duty, responsibility, and using her privileges to help others. This was the moment when all those lessons came together in a way she had never expected. The bully opened his mouth to say 0 and complete his countdown. But before he could speak, Isabella did something that shocked everyone present, including herself. She stepped forward, placed herself directly between Thomas and the bullies, and spoke in a voice that carried all the power and authority of her royal bloodline. That is enough, she said. And even though she was only 8 years old, something in her tone made every person in the clearing freeze in place. The real confrontation was about to begin. Isabella stood between Thomas and the bullies, her heart pounding but her mind surprisingly clear. The moment she had stepped forward and used her real royal voice, everything had changed. The bullies were no longer sneering or laughing. They were staring at her with uncertainty and growing fear. She realized that up until now, they had seen her as just another child who happened to have a fancy title. But when she had spoken with true authority, they had suddenly remembered exactly who she was and what that meant. The tallest bully still held the wooden horse, but his arm had dropped to his side. He was no longer threatening to throw it, and Isabella could see confusion in his eyes. He had expected her to back down when he challenged her, but instead she had stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said, his voice much quieter now. "We did not mean any real harm." "Stop talking," Isabella said calmly but firmly. "You have said quite enough already." The clearing fell completely silent. Thomas wiped his eyes and stood up straighter, no longer preparing to kneel. The other two bullies looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. Isabella's mind was racing as she considered her options. She could simply command them to return the toy and leave, and they would probably obey now that they realized she was serious. But that would not really solve the problem. These boys would just find another victim when she was not around to protect them. She needed to do something that would make them understand why their behavior was wrong, not just make them afraid of getting in trouble. Her tutors had taught her that true leadership was about changing hearts and minds, not just forcing compliance. "Thomas," she said without turning around, "please step back a few paces. I need to have a conversation with these gentlemen." Thomas did as she asked, though he kept watching nervously. He was worried about leaving the princess alone with the boys who had been so cruel to him. Isabella studied the three bullies carefully. Now that they were no longer acting aggressive, she could see them more clearly. The tallest one was obviously the leader, but she could tell he was not as confident as he pretended to be. The other two followed his lead because they were scared of him too. "What are your names?" she asked in a calm, businesslike tone. The boys exchanged glances, unsure if they should answer. Finally, the tallest one spoke. "I am Marcus Thornfield, Your Highness. This is Edmund Blackwood and Peter Ashworth." Isabella nodded, memorizing their names and thinking about what she knew of their families. Thornfield, that was a wealthy merchant family who had recently been granted minor noble titles. Blackwood was an old noble name, but she thought they had lost much of their wealth in recent years. Ashworth was definitely a merchant family dealing in luxury goods. This information gave her valuable insight into their behavior. They were all from families who were either new to having status or were worried about losing it. That explained their need to put others down to feel better about themselves. "Do you know who Thomas's father is?" Isabella asked. "Some guard," Marcus said dismissively, though with less confidence than before. "Captain Robert Miller," Isabella corrected him. "He has served my family faithfully for 10 years. He has saved my father's life twice during attempts by enemies of the kingdom to harm him. He has been personally decorated for bravery 3 times. The bullies looked uncomfortable as they realized they had been tormenting the son of a genuine war hero. "Captain Miller is currently away on a secret mission for the crown," Isabella continued, her voice carrying the weight of royal authority. "He is risking his life right now to protect people like your families from those who would do them harm." She could see this information was having an impact. The boys were beginning to understand that they had been completely wrong about Thomas and his family's importance. "But that is not the most important thing," Isabella continued. "Even if Thomas's father was just an ordinary guard or a baker or a farmer, it would still be wrong to treat Thomas the way you have been treating him. Do you know why?" The boys shook their heads, genuinely curious now despite their fear. "Because every person has dignity and worth, regardless of their birth or their family's wealth," Isabella explained. "That is not just something pretty that we say in court. It is the foundation of good leadership and a just society." She began to pace slowly back and forth, the way she had seen her mother do during important conversations. "You think that being born into wealthy families makes you better than others. But what you do not understand is that privilege comes with responsibility, not entitlement." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Isabella held up a hand to stop him. "I am not finished," she said. "You have shown me today that you believe might makes right. that the strong should prey upon the weak. But that is the philosophy of bandits and tyrants, not of civilized people. She stopped pacing and looked directly at each of them in turn. If you truly believe that power should belong to those who are strong enough to take it, then you should be very careful. Because I am much more powerful than any of you. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. The boys understood that she could make their families' lives very difficult if she chose to. But Isabella was not finished with her lesson. However, she continued, I do not use my power to hurt people or to take things from them just because I can. I use it to protect others and to make sure everyone is treated fairly. That is what real strength looks like. She gestured toward Thomas, who was watching in amazement. Thomas showed more real strength today than all three of you combined. When you insulted his father, he defended him even though he was outnumbered and afraid. When you tried to make him humiliate himself, he was willing to do it to save something precious to him. That is courage. Isabella could see that her words were having an effect. The boys were no longer looking defiant or angry. Instead, they looked ashamed and uncertain. Now, she said, here is what is going to happen. You are going to return Thomas's toy to him immediately, and you are going to apologize sincerely for your behavior. Marcus still held the wooden horse, but he made no move to give it back yet. And if we refuse? He asked quietly. Isabella smiled, but it was not a particularly warm smile. Then I will be forced to inform my parents about what happened here today. And since you have been so concerned with proper social order, let me remind you of where your families stand in relation to mine. She did not need to elaborate. Everyone present understood that the royal family could make life very difficult for merchant families and minor nobles who offended them. But, Isabella continued, her voice becoming gentler, I would much rather that you do the right thing because you understand why it is right, not because you are afraid of punishment. That would show real growth and maturity. The boys stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had said. Isabella waited patiently, giving them time to make their decision. The silence stretched on as the three bullies wrestled with their decision. Isabella could see the internal struggle playing out on their faces. Their pride wanted them to refuse, but their growing understanding of the situation was pulling them in a different direction. Finally, Edmund, the quietest of the three bullies, stepped forward. Marcus, he said softly to the leader, maybe we should listen to her. Marcus turned to glare at his friend, clearly angry at this betrayal of their united front. What are you saying, Edmund? I'm saying that maybe we were wrong, Edmund replied, his voice gaining strength. My grandmother always told me that true nobility comes from how you treat others, especially those who cannot fight back. We have not been acting nobly today. Peter, the third bully, nodded slowly. Edmund is right. This whole thing got out of hand. We started by just teasing, but it became something much worse. Marcus looked between his two friends, realizing that they were abandoning his leadership. He was being isolated, just as he had tried to isolate Thomas. The irony was not lost on Isabella, who watched the drama unfold with careful attention. You are both being weak, Marcus said desperately. She is just trying to scare us with her royal authority. Once we leave here, what can she really do to us? Isabella decided it was time to demonstrate exactly what she could do. She had hoped to convince them through reason and morality, but if Marcus needed a more practical lesson, she was prepared to provide it. Thomas, she said clearly, please tell me exactly what these boys said about your father and about Captain Miller's service to the crown. Thomas looked uncertain about repeating the cruel words, but Isabella nodded encouragingly. In a quiet voice, he recounted the insults and dismissive comments the bullies had made about his father's importance and worth. I see, Isabella said thoughtfully. Marcus, you stated that Captain Miller is not important and that Thomas has no right to possess nice things because of his father's position as a guard. Marcus began to look worried as he realized where this was heading. You also stated that my royal authority means nothing outside the palace grounds, and that I should run crying to my parents, Isabella continued. Is that an accurate summary of your position? I may have spoken in anger, Marcus said weakly. Indeed you did, Isabella agreed, and now I think it would be educational for everyone if I demonstrated just how far royal authority actually extends. She turned toward the main party area and raised her voice in a clear, carrying tone that had been trained by the finest tutors in the kingdom. Lord Chancellor Harrison. Captain Andrews, Would you please join me for a moment? Marcus went pale. Lord Chancellor Harrison was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, responsible for court protocol and noble affairs. Captain Andrews was the head of palace security and Captain Miller's direct superior. Within moments, both men appeared around the hedge, having been enjoying refreshments at the party nearby. They moved quickly when they heard the princess calling, recognizing the formal tone she had used. "Your Highness," said Lord Chancellor Harrison, with a deep bow. "How may we serve you?" Isabella gestured toward the group of boys. "Lord Chancellor, I would like you to meet Marcus Thornfield, Edmund Blackwood, and Peter Ashworth. I believe you know their families." The Lord Chancellor's expression became very serious as he studied the boys. "Indeed I do, Your Highness." "Is there some matter requiring my attention?" "Marcus has been explaining to me his views on social order and the proper treatment of those in service to the crown," Isabella said calmly. "He believes that the son of a royal guard has no right to possess nice things, and that guards like Captain Miller are unimportant to the kingdom's welfare." Captain Andrews stepped forward, his face darkening. "Captain Miller? Robert Miller? The same Captain Miller who saved His Majesty's life during the Blackstone Rebellion?" "The very same," Isabella confirmed. Marcus also expressed the opinion that royal authority has no meaning outside palace grounds and suggested that I should run to my parents when faced with unpleasant behavior. Both men turned to stare at Marcus with expressions of disbelief and growing anger. The boy was now trembling, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. "Your Highness," said the Lord Chancellor carefully, "are you saying that these young men have been disrespectful to you and have insulted Captain Miller's service?" "I am saying much more than that," Isabella replied. "I am saying that they have been tormenting Thomas Miller, Captain Miller's son, attempting to destroy his personal property, and trying to force him to humiliate himself for their entertainment." Thomas stepped forward and held up the wooden horse, which Marcus was still clutching. "They took my father's gift and would not give it back," he said quietly. Captain Andrews looked at the toy and then at Marcus. "You took a child's toy? A gift from his father who is currently risking his life on a royal mission?" Marcus finally seemed to understand the full scope of his situation. He was not just in trouble for bullying another child. He had insulted a war hero, disrespected a princess, and demonstrated behavior that could bring shame upon his family's name. It was not meant to be serious," he stammered. "Not serious?" Captain Andrews repeated. "Young man, Captain Miller has served this kingdom with honor and distinction for a decade. He is currently investigating threats against the royal family in hostile territory. And you think it is appropriate to torment his son and steal his possessions?" Edmund and Peter were both looking sick with worry. They had not realized just how serious their behavior would seem to adults, especially important adults who had the power to affect their families' futures. Isabella watched as the reality of the situation sank in for all three boys. This was exactly what she had hoped would happen. Sometimes people needed to see the real consequences of their actions before they could understand why those actions were wrong. "However," Isabella said, her voice taking on a more merciful tone, "I believe in the possibility of redemption. These boys are young, and young people can learn from their mistakes if they are truly sorry and willing to change." She looked directly at Marcus. "You have a choice to make right now. You can continue to defend your behavior and face the full consequences of your actions, or you can admit that you were wrong, return Thomas's property, offer a sincere apology, and commit to better behavior in the future." Marcus looked around at the faces watching him, the stern officials, the disappointed princess, his worried friends, and Thomas, who was waiting patiently for his father's gift to be returned. Finally, he stepped forward and held out the wooden horse to Thomas. His hand was shaking as he spoke. "I am sorry," he said, and for the first time his voice sounded genuinely remorseful rather than angry or scared. "I was wrong to take your toy, and I was wrong to say those things about your father. Captain Miller sounds like a very brave and honorable man, and you should be proud to be his son." Thomas accepted his precious toy with obvious relief, holding it carefully against his chest. "Thank you," he said softly. Edmund and Peter quickly stepped forward to add their own apologies, clearly sincere in their regret for what had happened. Isabella nodded approvingly. "That was the right choice," she said, "and I hope it was made for the right reasons." As the Lord Chancellor and Captain Andrews led the three boys away to have serious conversations with their parents, Isabella and Thomas found themselves alone in the small clearing behind the hedge. The sounds of the garden party continued in the background, but this quiet space felt like a different world entirely. Thomas carefully examined his wooden horse, running his fingers over its painted surface to make sure it had not been damaged during the ordeal. When he was satisfied that his father's gift was safe, he looked up at Isabella with eyes full of gratitude and amazement. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "thank you for helping me. I never thought a princess would what?" Isabella asked with a gentle smile. "Would care about someone like me," Thomas finished honestly. Isabella felt a pang of sadness at his words. The fact that Thomas was surprised by her kindness meant that he had been taught to believe he was somehow less important than other people. That was exactly the kind of thinking that had created the bullying situation in the first place. "Thomas," she said seriously, "I want you to understand something very important. You are not someone like you, and I am not someone like me. We are both just people, and all people deserve to be treated with kindness and respect." She sat down on a nearby stone bench and patted the space beside her, inviting Thomas to join her. He hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure if it was proper for him to sit next to royalty, but Isabella's warm smile convinced him it was acceptable. "Your father is away serving the kingdom," Isabella continued as they sat together. "That makes you very important to me and to everyone who cares about the safety of our people. But even if your father was not a hero, even if he was just an ordinary person doing an ordinary job, you would still deserve to be treated well." Thomas nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "My father always tells me that a person's worth is not determined by their birth or their wealth, but by their character and their actions." "Your father is a very wise man," Isabella said approvingly. "And today you showed excellent character. You defended your father's honor even when you were scared. You were willing to make sacrifices to protect something precious to you. And most importantly, you never became cruel or mean, even when others were being cruel to you." Thomas looked down at the wooden horse in his hands. "I wanted to fight them," he admitted quietly. "When they said those things about my father, I wanted to hit them. But you did not," Isabella pointed out. "That shows real strength and self-control. Fighting them would have given them an excuse to hurt you more, and it would not have solved the real problem." She stood up and walked over to look through the hedge at the garden party beyond. Her parents were still talking with their guests, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded nearby. "I learned something important today, too," Isabella said thoughtfully. "I learned that being royal is not just about living in a palace and wearing pretty dresses. It is about using whatever power you have to protect people and to make sure everyone is treated fairly." Thomas joined her at the hedge. "You were very brave, Your Highness. Those boys were much older and bigger than you." Isabella considered this. "I was scared too," she admitted. "But sometimes being brave does not mean not feeling afraid. Sometimes it means doing the right thing even when you are afraid." They stood in comfortable silence for a few moments, both thinking about what had happened and what it meant. "Do you think they really learned their lesson?" Thomas asked eventually. "Or will they just be more careful not to get caught next time?" It was a perceptive question that showed Thomas was thinking deeply about the situation. Isabella was impressed by his insight. "I think Edmund and Peter genuinely understood that they were wrong," she said after considering carefully. "They seemed truly sorry for their behavior. Marcus, I am not sure about Marcus yet. He apologized, but I think he was mostly scared of getting in trouble." She turned to face Thomas directly. "But here is something important I learned today. We cannot control what other people do or how they change. We can only control our own actions and hope that by doing the right thing, we inspire others to do the same." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "My father says something similar. He says that leading by example is the most powerful form of leadership." "Your father is definitely a wise man," Isabella repeated. "I look forward to meeting him when he returns from his mission." Thomas's face lit up with excitement and surprise. "You want to meet my father?" "Of course I do," Isabella said warmly. "Any man who raised such a courageous and thoughtful son must be someone worth knowing. Besides, I want to thank him personally for his service to our family and our kingdom." As they prepared to return to the main party, Isabella had one more important thing to say. "Thomas, I hope you will remember today not because of the bad things that happened, but because of how you handled them. You showed dignity, courage, and integrity when it would have been easier to give up or give in. Those are the qualities of a true hero, just like your father." She paused and smiled at him. "And I hope you will also remember that you have a friend in the royal family. If anyone ever treats you badly again, you can come to me for help." "That is what friends do for each other." Thomas's eyes filled with happy tears. "Thank you, Your Highness. I will never forget today, and I will never forget your kindness." As they walked back toward the garden party together, Isabella reflected on all the lessons she had learned. She had discovered that her royal position came with real responsibilities, not just privileges. She had learned that sometimes gentle persuasion was not enough, and that true authority had to be backed up with real consequences. Most importantly, she had learned that standing up for others was not always easy, but it was always worth doing. The garden party continued around them as they rejoined the celebration, but both Isabella and Thomas were forever changed by their experience. They had faced cruelty and injustice together, and they had emerged stronger and wiser. From that day forward, Princess Isabella made it her personal mission to ensure that everyone in the kingdom, regardless of their station in life, was treated with dignity and respect. And Thomas Miller grew up to become a man of great character and integrity, always remembering the day when a young princess taught him that true nobility comes from how we treat others, especially those who cannot protect themselves. The wooden horse remained one of Thomas's most treasured possessions throughout his life, not just because it was a gift from his beloved father, but because it reminded him of the day he learned that even in the darkest moments, there are always people willing to stand up for what is right. And in the years that followed, whenever Princess Isabella faced difficult decisions or challenging situations, she would remember the afternoon behind the hedge when she first learned what it truly meant to be royal.